Welcome back to the Deep Dives. Before we get into the stack today, I actually have a really quick request for you.
Here we go.
Yeah, if you are getting value from these conversations, if you like digging into the kind of books that usually get completely buried by the algorithm, hit that like and subscribe button right now.
It really does help.
It does. It helps us keep the lights on and keeps these deep dives coming. And you are definitely going to want to be subscribed for this one.
Oh, absolutely. We are wading into some pretty turbulent waters today.
We really are. So we're looking at an ebook today. It's called Prepper Men, Foresight and Virtue in Disaster Preparations by Conrad Riker. And I got to say, when I first saw that title, I was expecting, the usual checklist.
Right, buy 50 pounds of rice in our water filter.
Exactly. Rotate your batteries, get medical kit. But this is something else entirely.
It really is. If you go into this expecting a standard Boy Scout manual, you are going to be shocked. Riker has written what is essentially a manifesto.
Yep.
It's ultra long, it's incredibly incisive, and it's a fascinating read. But he is explicitly targeting a very specific demographic here. He says he's writing for, quote, rational men.
Right. He's aiming squarely at the red pill manosphere audience, guys who feel like the ground is just fundamentally shifting under their feet right now.
Exactly. And he frames it almost as a philosophical text first and a survival guide second.
And just a quick heads up to everyone listening, this ebook is dense. We're going to hit the high notes and synthesize the data, but if you want the full blueprint, you really need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks right now and buy the copy yourself.
Yeah, there's just way too much nuance to cover in a single conversation.
Right. So let's get into the core premise. Because it isn't just that storms happen or grids go down.
No, his central thesis is much bigger. He argues that we are living in a time where our institutions, the very things you and I rely on to keep society safe, have been fundamentally captured.
And we should clarify here, we are strictly reporting on Riker's arguments and the contents of the book. We're not taking sides or endorsing the political viewpoints, but we want to give you the exact framework he's building from.
Right, impartially speaking, his claim is that these institutions have been captured by feminist and Marxist ideologies over the last few decades.
Which he argues has made them fragile.
Extremely fragile. He claims it's created a competence crisis. Basically, that these ideologies prioritize feelings and inclusion over raw functional capability.
He calls it the trap of modernity.
Yes, the trap of modernity. When things are calm, society mocks masculine strength. They call it toxic. They try to medicate it out of boys in schools. But then a crisis hits. The moment the grid goes down or the pipes burst or there's a riot, suddenly nobody cares about inclusive language. Society immediately starts begging for that exact toxic strength to fix the infrastructure and restore order.
It's like the break glass in case of emergency version of masculinity. We hate it until we desperately need it.
Exactly. And the whole mission of this deep dive is to unpack Riker's solution to that trap. How do you stop relying on these fragile systems? How do you build what he calls sovereignty?
Sovereignty. That's a huge word in this book. And to understand sovereignty, he starts by showing you just how fragile the system actually is. He opens with this really compelling breakdown of the colonial pipeline hack.
From May 2021.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah.
Gas stations in 12 states ran dry in, 48 hours?
It was incredibly fast.
People were filling up grocery bags with gasoline. It was total chaos.
It was. But Riker zooms in on the actual cause. Because we all imagine cyber warfare as this Hollywood scenario, right? Elite hackers typing rapidly in a dark room, breaking encryption.
But that's not what happened at all.
Not even close.
Yeah.
The attackers got in through a single inactive VPN account.
A legacy account that someone just forgot about.
Yeah. No multi-factor authentication, just a single password that had been reused. Riker speculates it was probably scrawled on a sticky note attached to a monitor somewhere.
That is just terrifyingly banal.
That's his whole point. The complexity of modern bureaucracy breeds this fragility. You've got these massive HR departments and compliance teams, but the actual security, the lock on the front door, is just a sticky note.
So his takeaway is that relying on bureaucrats is suicide, whether that's FEMA coming to save you or your IT department.
Right. And he contrasts this bureaucratic failure with the concept of autonomy. He brings up the Venezuela power grid collapse.
In 2019.
Yes. When the lights went out there, the masses, the general population, they just sat and waited because they had been trained to wait for the government to fix it.
But the men Riker's talking to, the prepper men, they didn't wait.
No, they had already accepted the system was broken, so while everyone else was waiting, they were out trading stockpiled water filters for gold watches.
Which brings up the squirrel analogy. which honestly I laughed at first, but it makes a lot of sense.
It really does. He says, look at a squirrel in the autumn. It's out there burying acorns. It isn't panicking. It isn't reading conspiracy theories.
It's just instinct.
Exactly. Biological instinct. Riker argues modern men have been socialized to suppress that exact instinct. So when trouble starts, instead of acting, what do? They pull out their phones and start filming vertically for TikTok.
Just documenting their own demise for the algorithm.
Yeah. And that suppression of biological instinct leads right into what is easily the most controversial part of the book, section 2, where he talks about biological imperatives.
Right. And again, just reporting his findings here. But he dives deep into gender dynamics. He says biology isn't bigoted. And he uses this wild comparison between the Apollo 13 mission and modern corporate culture.
It's a stark contrast. You look at Apollo 13, 3 men in a tin can, an oxygen tank literally explodes. The ground crew in Houston is entirely men, and Riker highlights how they fixed it.
Duct tape, slide rules, and just raw problem solving.
Exactly. There was no debate. There was no holding space for anyone's anxiety. They just executed. He compares that to what he calls empathy interludes in modern boardrooms.
Empathy interludes.
Yeah. He brings up Caterpillar Inc., noting they had this massive 15-year bull run in the market specifically because their corporate culture was devoid of feelings checks.
He actually coins a term for this, right? The Praxa effect?
Yes, the Praxa effect. It's his term for the efficiency you gain from an uninterrupted, pragmatic command chain. It prevents death by committee.
And he backs this up with data. The MIT study on puzzle solving.
This is fascinating. They tested mixed gender groups against all-male groups on complex puzzles under high time pressure. And the all-male groups solved them 28 seconds faster.
Which doesn't sound like a lot until you're in a survival situation. 28 seconds is an eternity.
It's the difference between life and death. And Riker explains the mechanism behind the delay. The mixed groups naturally spent time seeking consensus. They wanted everyone to agree and feel heard.
But the guys didn't.
No, the all-male groups instantly establish a hierarchy. Basically, you know the most, you lead, the rest of us follow. In a crisis, consensus is a luxury tax you just can't afford.
He also pulls from military data to prove this point. Special Forces, the Marine Corps.
Right, he talks about Hell Week. And he says the trait that actually gets you through isn't having the biggest biceps. It's the ability to swallow despair. Just internalize it and keep moving.
And he cites simulation statistics showing that mixed gender units had lower mission completion times.
Lower completion times and higher friendly fire incidents compared to the all-male teams. Because, he argues, biologically, men are hardwired to protect women. So in a firefight, a man's focus splits between accomplishing the mission and protecting the female in his unit.
And that split-second distraction gets people killed.
Exactly.
Which connects to this social pressure men face right now. He calls it the vulnerability trap. And I gotta say, reading this part, I think a lot of guys are gonna relate to this double bind he describes.
Oh, absolutely. It's the massive gap between what society says it wants for men and what it actually rewards.
The dating app data was brutal.
Millions of swipes analyzed. Women constantly say they want sensitive, vulnerable partners. But the data shows they overwhelmingly swipe right on displays of stoicism, physical capability, and resources.
And he tells that story about Mike, the finance VP.
Yeah, that was a tough read. Mike totally bought into the corporate HR narrative. They told him, bring your whole self to work, be vulnerable. So during this incredibly stressful company merger, he actually broke down in a meeting.
He cried about his divorce in front of his team.
And he was fired within a month. Not explicitly for crying, obviously, they'd never say that, but he lost the respect of the room. He was instantly viewed as unstable.
Because emotional processing is a luxury.
Right. Riker says corporate life is just survival with air conditioning. If you crumble, you lose your tribe's respect and your authority, period.
Wow. Okay, so if we accept Riker's premise that the system is incredibly fragile and men need to step back into this stoic, pragmatic role, we have to talk about how you actually prepare the economics of it. Because you can't feed your family with stoicism.
No, you need physical resources. And Riker's economic philosophy is pretty blunt. Paper money becomes confetti.
He points to Weimar Germany for this. I think we've all seen those historical photos of people pushing literal wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy a loaf of bread.
But Riker puts a very specific metric on it. He notes that before the economic collapse in Germany, 1 ounce of gold could buy a high-quality tailored suit. After the currency totally collapsed, that exact same ounce of gold could buy 10,000 suits.
It's all about hard assets.
It is. It's the transfer of wealth from paper promises to tangible goods.
And it isn't just ancient history. He brings up Argentina in 2020.
Right. He contrasts a friend who kept all his retirement savings in government bonds, which are basically just IOUs from the state, and that friend lost 80% of his purchasing power.
Meanwhile, Riker had physical gold.
Krugerrands.
Right.
And because he held hard assets, he was able to buy a coastal escape property for pennies when the local real estate market bottomed out.
Okay, but we have to talk about his creative capitalism chapter. Specifically, the Venezuela DVD trade. Because when I read this, it sounded like an urban legend. He actually claims he traded 3,000 blockbuster DVDs for a working bakery in Caracas.
An entire bakery for used DVDs. It sounds completely insane.
It does.
But when you break down his logic, it makes perfect sense. In a hyperinflationary collapse, the currency is dead. People might have basic food, but they are terrified, the streets are dangerous, and they are stuck inside.
So boredom becomes this massive market force.
Exactly. The internet was heavily censored or just down. Streaming didn't work. Physical media was literally the only escape from reality.
So he traded distraction to a baker who had food but was desperate for entertainment.
Yes. He calls it survival geometry. The value of an item isn't the price tag on it, it's its utility in that specific moment.
That is wild. It completely flips how you think about wealth. And he doubles down on this with the garbage barge story.
Oh, during the Suez Canal blockage.
Yeah, the Ever Given getting stuck in freezing global trade.
Right, so FedEx and all these massive logistics companies are totally paralyzed. What are they doing? They're scheduling Zoom meetings to discuss the supply chain delay.
Empathy interludes.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Riker bypasses the entire corporate bottleneck. He charters a literal garbage barge to move a massive shipment of Turkish towels.
How do you even charter a garbage barge for textiles?
Well, waste management vessels operate under entirely different customs classifications and route permissions than commercial freighters. So while the corporate giants were stuck in red tape, Riker used a dirty asset to move clean products.
And made an absolute killing.
He claims an 18,000% profit margin simply because he was the only supplier with actual physical inventory available.
Adapt or die.
That's the lesson. You want assets that are physical and under your direct control. Heirloom seeds, ammunition, insulin, gold. Not widgets on the screen that a bank can freeze or a hacker can erase.
But, and he addresses this, having all that physical stuff makes you a huge target. Which leads into Section 4, Brotherhood and Leadership. Because Riker is completely anti-lone wolf.
He destroys the lone wolf myth. He tells the story of Dave.
We all know a Dave.
We do. The guy sitting in his basement with 12,000 rounds of ammo, totally ready for World War III. But he can't even hold a normal conversation with his next-door neighbor.
And Riker says Dave is the very first guy to die.
Without a doubt. Dave actually had a survival group, but it fell apart over a petty dispute about 2 cans of beans. Why? Because Dave had zero social capital. He didn't know how to negotiate or lead.
Which brings us to the silverback theory.
Yeah, and this is where he throws democracy out the window.
Totally out the window.
He compares a high-functioning survival group to a troop of gorillas. When a leopard attacks the troop, the silverback, the dominant male, he doesn't call a town hall meeting. He doesn't ask everyone how they're feeling about the leopard.
He just attacks.
He acts. Riker argues that in high-stakes crises, democracy is a fatal liability. You need a strict hierarchy based on competence.
And he calls society's refusal to listen to these pragmatic men the Cassandra coefficient.
Right, referencing the Trojan War. Cassandra warned Troy about the horse, but no one listened. Riker argues that modern societies that silence male pragmatism, that call it toxic or alarmist, they are just digging their own mass graves.
He actually connects this hardcore leadership style back to ancient Stoicism, and he uses the 1972 Andes flight crash to illustrate it, which is a really heavy story.
It's the ultimate survival scenario. A rugby team crashes high in the freezing mountains. They are starving to death. And Riker quotes Roberto Canessa, one of the survivors who made the brutal decision that they had to eat the remains of the dead passengers to survive.
And Canessa's quote was, "Our duty to live outweighs the luxury of disgust."
The luxury of disgust.
That phrase has been stuck in my head since I read it.
It perfectly encapsulates Riker's morality. True authority isn't about yelling or macho posturing. It's the ability to do the incredibly hard, necessary thing without flinching.
You contrast that true authority with toxic aggression, right?
Yeah.
Using the story from Hurricane Katrina.
Yes, the story of Robert the Marine. So Katrina hits, the city floods, And looters are absolutely everywhere. People are screaming, waving guns around, total chaos.
And Robert is guarding a local pharmacy.
But he isn't shouting. He isn't waving a shotgun. Robert is just sitting in a folding lawn chair in front of the pharmacy doors, dead quiet, cleaning his fingernails with a Kabar combat knife.
He didn't say a single word.
Not one word. And the looters, all these aggressive guys with guns, they took one look at his demeanor and walked right past him.
Because that quiet competence is terrifying.
Exactly. Riker says that is the true energy of a prepper man. It isn't bluster, it's just dangerous, quiet, competent.
Okay, so we've got the mindset, the economics, the brotherhood. But as we get into the final section, we need to talk about what exactly we are preparing for. Because Riker is intensely focused on modern technological threats.
He views cyber warfare as the ultimate silent killer. He brings up NotPetya, and he's sounding the alarm on AI-powered worms. His biggest fear is our total dependence on systems that require constant software updates just to function.
And his solution to high-tech warfare is surprisingly low-tech.
Air gaps and analog backups.
Let's get really specific here. When he talks about building a Faraday cage, he isn't telling you to line a concrete bunker with copper, right?
No, it's very practical.
Okay.
He says go buy a galvanized steel trash can, line the inside with cardboard so that nothing inside touches the metal walls, and store your critical electronics in there.
Like what?
Emergency radios, tablets loaded with downloaded topographical maps, solar charge controllers.
Because the metal trash can physically blocks an EMP or malicious signal.
Exactly. It acts as an electromagnetic shield.
Yep.
And he pairs this with his insistence on copper switches.
Copper switches. What exactly does he mean by that?
Mechanical relays. Old school physical switches.
Yeah.
He points out that if you have a modern smart home where your lights, your locks, and your thermostat are controlled by Wi-Fi, you are incredibly vulnerable.
Because if the grid is hacked, your house is useless.
Right. If the internet is weaponized, your smart home becomes a brick. Riker wants you to have physical switches that mechanically complete a circuit. He says, quote, "You want switches that don't require software updates." His analog house will still function when the smart grid goes down.
He applies that exact same skepticism to modern education, too. He has a really hot take on the COVID school lockdowns.
Oh, he does. He looks at public Zoom classes during COVID and views them as a complete and total failure of the state. He contrasts that with fathers who pulled their kids out and took over their education using discipline drills and physical training.
He actually argues that public schools pathologize male energy.
He makes the claim that we take young boys who naturally have high energy and a biological drive to conquer their environment, and instead of channeling it, we label them with ADHD and drug them into compliance.
But in a crisis.
In a survival context, that high energy is your greatest asset. It is literally the difference between freezing in terror and acting to save your family.
Which brings us full circle to his central theme, sovereignty. Taking back control from systems that do not have your best interests at heart.
That is the word he hammers home in the epilogue, sovereignty. He tells the reader, look, by finishing this book, you are now different. You have chosen preparation over dependence.
He calls it building a brotherhood of foresight. And I absolutely love the line he uses near the end. He says the goal isn't just surviving the collapse. The goal is engineering legacies.
It's about being the guy who can sit back and laugh at a blackout while the rest of the neighborhood is panicking.
He paints this vivid image of the unbreakable protector.
And Riker's final message is that this archetype, the strong, capable patriarch, isn't some toxic relic of the past. In his view, it is literally the only thing standing between order and chaos when the lights inevitably go out.
You have the plan, now execute. That is just an incredibly powerful place to land.
It really puts the responsibility squarely on your shoulders. You can't unknow what you've just learned.
You really can't. So look, to everyone listening, if this conversation sparked something in you today, if you're feeling that call to build sovereignty, we have barely scratched the surface here. You need the specific blueprints, the analog checklists, the economic strategies. You need to go to Amazon Kindle or Google Playbooks and buy Prepper Men, Foresight and Virtue in Disaster Preparations right now.
And for ongoing real-time updates, because Riker is constantly analyzing new cyber threats and economic shifts, you need to follow him on Substack. His handle is @Conrad and Riker.
Definitely check that out. And hey, if you found this deep dive valuable, if it made you rethink your reliance on the grid, or even if it just scared you into finally buying a mechanical water filter, do us a favor. Like this video, subscribe to the show, and share it with a friend who really needs to wake up.
Because knowledge is the one asset that paper money can't buy and hackers can't erase.
That is the absolute truth. I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. When the digital world goes dark, are you going to be the one waiting for a rescue that isn't coming? Or are you going to be the unbreakable protector your family needs? Think about it. Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay safe, stay sovereign, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Take care, everyone.